morning. Welcome to day 4 of our class on agent training this month. Today we are going to be talking about Code of Ethics, and Eric is going to lead the class. Just wanted to remind everyone that we are live streaming and recording, and you can find the manual for today and the PowerPoint that Stacy did in Jostle in the library under agent training. And if you have any questions at all, just let me know. Have a great day. Thanks. Here's Eric.
Good morning. We're actually going to start off with a couple YouTube videos. And the reason I'm starting off with these is because we're going to get into the Code of Ethics, talks about advertising and what we can and can't do. And in today's day and age, we got to be a little bit more creative than ever before, and we have more outlets to do that. So bear with me while I pull this up here. You have it on the screen, right, Joe? So this one's a little bit more in depth and a lot of production value, done very well. We're not all this talented or have this voice. So I'm going to show this one to make you feel a little bit better about yourself and your chances of making a good video. We won't get through the whole thing. I can't. Don't cry, Gina. Just FYI, he's the best singer of the group. It goes downhill from here. All right, so we're gonna end that one there. I know. But it just goes to show that you don't have to be good to make a video and kind of promote yourself. The last one, it's 2.5 minutes. It's something that Paul Harvey did. For those who don't know who Paul Harvey was, he was a radio personality, an amazing storyteller. And this is called So God Made a Realtor. And just so that you guys understand the history, the term realtor, all it is a made-up word. And Charles Chadbourne in I want to say 1927. Usually I have it off the top of my head, but there's a lot of things in my head today. But anyway, he was a realtor, or real estate. They used to call him real estate men. He was a real estate man in Minnesota, and he was walking, and back then they had the paper boys on the corner yelling. I'm sorry, it was 1917. So the paper boy on the corner yelling, "Real estate man swindles widow," and that really upset him. And he went and proposed that there's a difference between a real estate man and a true professional real estate professional. So he came up with the term realtor, went to Louisiana, went to New Orleans where the convention was that year, made the proposal that people that are part of the association be called realtors. It got adopted. It's an interesting story if you're a history nerd like I am, or a realtor nerd like I am, but there was actually court cases where it went all through the system because people were really upset that we were going to have this made-up word representing our profession. So that's the history of realtor. The preamble to our code of ethics is amazing. You should read it. If you haven't, it's something you should read regularly because it really gives you a sense of pride and gives you a focus on what it is we do. So Paul Harvey is an amazing storyteller. He passed away a few years back, but he recorded this, and I will tell you that the video is branded to another company, but maybe at some point we could do something similar to this if we can get permission to use the, make sure we don't step on any copyright toes. But anyway, I'm going to play this. I'm going to turn it up too.
God said, I need somebody that will get up before dawn with the dedication of the sun, risk time, energy, and investment for no salary or guarantee, work long hours on the street, prepare and deliver presentations, serve and attend to others' emergencies, then stay out past midnight at a meeting of the school board. So God made a realtor. God needed somebody mentally tough that could wake up unemployed every day, yet gentle enough to have compassion for others. Someone that could build a bridge between people and technology. Someone to arrive home nightly in the dark to accommodate others' time, tell them, thank you for the opportunity, and mean it. So God made a realtor. God said, I need somebody that can sell like Carnegie, make contacts and write contracts, handle objections and deal with rejections, and who can finish her 40-hour week by Wednesday noon, then weary from contingencies and people's eccentricities and volatilities, put in another 40 hours and sacrifice a weekend too. So God made a realtor. God needed somebody that does not measure their work in hours, but by the satisfaction of their clients. Someone to handle emotions unemotionally. To meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. God said, I need somebody strong enough to knock doors and be ignored, direct mail and email, run ads, deliver notepads, Yelp and blog and work like a dog, make calls and get up from falls, and who will stop her efforts when called upon to mend the broken spirit of a colleague or client. So God made a realtor. It had to be somebody who'd honor ethics and integrity and not cut corners, to keep their head when all about them are losing theirs, and trust themselves where others doubt. Someone that can hold on when there is nothing left inside except the will which says, hold on. Who'd laugh and then sigh, and then respond with smiling eyes when her son says he wants to spend his life doing what mom does.
That's the end. You want it on both screens, right, Joe? Okay. All right. So, I do have a real estate school called Chadbourne School of Real Estate, named after Charles Chadbourne. And this is a class that I do all over. It's called Ethical versus Moral. This is a very interactive class, so it's very important that everybody put their 2 cents in. Even if you're watching it on live stream, if there's a way, if you have a question or you have input or you have something you want to bring up, please chime in. So, all right. Unfortunately, a lot of times when we have this class, people get emotional and excited at the same time. So we're just going to keep in mind 6 plus 3 equals 9, and so does 5 plus 4, just because I'm going to go over code of ethics, and some things are set in stone and some things are best practices. Well, still, at the end of the day, we can still be friends, okay? Even if you disagree with me. So we're going to dive right in. Article 1-1, real estate licensee sees your new listing. They immediately call the seller directly and offer to list the property for half of what they're going to pay you. Is this a violation of Article 1-1? Now, for those of you who aren't here in the live class, you can get the Code of Ethics. It's on Jostle and also at nar.realtor. So if you want to cheat and look at this, it's perfectly okay. So we have a couple people in the room. Does anybody think that this is a violation of Article 1? Yes. I have one person saying yes, 2. All right. Yeah. So most of the time people say yes. I deliberately start the class off with this way because a real estate licensee is not bound by our Code of Ethics. Only realtors are. So if it's an independent, that's not a yes. So if it's not a realtor, they're not bound by it.
But still, there are ways you report.
So this class is only focused on Code of Ethics. Some states do have laws or RSAs that govern this, but not all. So, but this is I'm only dealing with the Code of Ethics, unfortunately, today, or fortunately for me. Mm-hmm. All right, 1-2. You notice that someone on Facebook, Facebook Town Community page is looking for advice on buying or selling a home, and you chime in. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Does the code of ethics, do the code of ethics apply? Yes.
Yeah.
So they apply no matter what form of media or communications you have with them. So in the code of ethics, we'll see later on, you have to give your firm name and an office phone number. If you give your cell phone number, you have to give the office phone number. So make sure that if you chime in beyond just, hey, I'm a realtor in your area, direct message me or inbox me or whatever, make sure you put that you're with LAER Realty Partners and your office phone number, not your cell phone number. You can put your cell phone number too, but make sure you put your office phone number or else you're in violation. 1-3, you're doing a CMA and the seller thinks that the house should be priced $30,000 higher and you agree to take the listing at his number with the caveat that after 2 weeks, you will reduce it. I get a lot of feedback on this one. So, 1-3 says that a realtor, when trying to solicit a listing, cannot intentionally mislead a seller into the value of their home, correct? Okay. A lot of people say, well, we did a CMA, we told them it was worth $30,000 less. We have to do what they want us to do.
Right.
Okay. If you're doing a CMA presentation, are they already a client?
No.
No. They're a customer. Do we have lawful obedience to a customer?
No.
No. So, it's your choice whether you want to take it. I can tell you, and this is where I step on a lot of toes, and I'm sorry now if this offends you. If I'm put on the ethics panel and the consumer is saying, look, we listed our house at $300,000 and we lost 30 days, 45 days because we were overpriced, and they file a complaint that they feel like they were misled. It doesn't matter to me what your CMA says. It matters to me what your listing agreement says. And if I'm on that ethics panel and it comes to me and I see that you put 300 with a caveat that in 2 weeks you're going to reduce it down to the 270, you for 2 weeks have said there's a chance. Who's seen the movie Dumb and Dumber? Okay? So you're saying there's a chance. That's the way I see it. That's the way it's been interpreted in other cases. So just understand, if that's the way you want to do business, I'm not telling you not to. I'm just saying, if myself or other people that view this article the way I do see it, and your CMA says 270 and your listing agreement says 300, you made a conscious decision to take that person on as a client. At that point, you have lawful obedience. You're doing what they say. However, you are putting yourself at risk of a ethics violation. Just so you know, if you get called before an ethics panel and you're found in violation of one of the code of ethics, that stays on your record for 3 years. You can't change boards, and there's a good chance that there's going to be either a fine, education, or something else that comes into it. So just something to keep in mind. That's why these are important to follow. 1-4 is going from being a seller representative to being a buyer representative. And if you're working this example, you're working your office's booth at a town fair, and you're talking to a potential buyer, and you explain to them that they're going to save $10,000 to $15,000 by using you because you're a realtor. Is that a violation of the code of ethics?
Yes.
Yes. Good answer. Now, if you have documented proof and a valid reason other than just being a realtor, just being a realtor is not going to save somebody money. You have to have the skill sets that go along, being a good negotiator, knowing how to find properties, having those things, which there's people who aren't realtors that are licensed that are very good negotiators. So 1-5, you're holding an open house on your own listing and a consumer visits without representation. They want to use a realtor to look out for their best interests. You step up and take them on as a client and write an offer. Is this a violation of the code of ethics?
violation, but it wouldn't be, I mean, if they're supposed to be looking out, that's a, yes.
So if you look at, so the answer is yes. Because you have to have consent from both parties.
All right.
So yes, you're right. It is a violation. You'd have to get permission from the seller before you wrote up that offer. 1-6, moving right along. The market is on fire. You have a new listing that goes live on Thursday. Okay, this is one of those complicated math problems, guys. Sorry. You have a listing that goes live on Thursday. There's an open house scheduled for Sunday, and an offer comes in on Friday. You hold that offer till Monday to see what else comes in from the open house. Is this a violation of Article 1-6?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Because you must present as soon as possible. Now,
Unless otherwise stated.
correct. So if you've already had the conversation, make sure you've had the conversation and you have it either in an email or even as additional provisions on the listing agreement that you're going to hold list offers until such and such date, but make sure you have a reason and that the consumer, the seller, understands why it's beneficial or not beneficial to them to do that. Okay. But if you just receive an offer on Friday, you should submit it as soon as possible to the seller. If they're on vacation, if they've gone up north to go skiing, something like that, and they're out of pocket, that's understandable. But if it's just, well, we want to wait and leverage it against others, that's not a valid reason unless that's what they choose to do. 1-7. Your listing went under agreement after a very active week of showings. The next day, another offer comes in. Do you have to present that to your seller?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Unless the seller says, we no longer want to receive any more offers. Now, in Massachusetts, it's great because you guys, MLS PIN has a form that you fill out and you don't have to worry about it. New Hampshire doesn't have that form, so you would actually have to have something in writing. So an email or an addendum to the listing agreement saying seller has elected not to receive any more offers. So 2019, the one change to the actual code of ethics. There are two other changes that have to do with the ethics panels and hearings, but with regards to the code of ethics, there's only one change, and that is this one here. A buyer's agent asks you if their client's offer was submitted and you ignore them. Is this a violation of the new change?
It is.
So it's a trick question. So it's not if they only ask you verbally. They have to put it in writing. If it's not in writing, there's nothing you have to do. Should you? I think so, just as professional courtesy. But it's not a required. But if they send you an email, say, was our offer submitted? If they send you a letter through snail mail and says, was our offer submitted? Then yes, it has to be answered in writing. You don't have to say whether or not it was accepted. You just have to say, yes, it was presented. 1-8. You are a buyer's agent, and after 15 months and thousands of showings, an offer is submitted and accepted. 3 days later, that buyer calls you because the perfect home came back on the market and they want to see it. Are you obligated to show them that house?
Yes.
So I got a couple yeses. Anybody want to say no? So the answer is no. Your obligation to show them only goes till they're under contract. Now, if you've been holding their hand for 15 months, why would you not show them the property? So best practices, you probably should show them, but you're not violating a code of ethics if you say no.
Okay. I'm going through that right now, so that's a good question.
Yeah. So
Said we've already been under contract for a month.
So you don't have to show them anymore. What she said is she's been under contract for over a month. You don't have to show them anymore, but is that gonna hurt your relationship with them? Because we're not just selling them one home, right? We're gonna
Probably.
be their realtor for life, so, or probably. In that case, yeah. All right, 1-9, you have a listing and one of the sellers has a terminal illness. Due to mounting medical bills, they must sell their property. The listing expires and they go with a different agent. The very next day, you have the perfect buyer fall into your lap looking for a steal. Here's the question. Can you take that new client that you have and tell them, hey, look, these people have a medical situation, they need to sell, we can put in a low ball offer?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. No.
Listing agent, aren't you?
No, the listing expired, so now you're the buyer's agent.
But you still have to perform that.
You still have to maintain the confidentiality that they once had. Okay, so the answer is no, you can't tell them. You can't use that against the sellers, even though you know.
You can still represent the seller, but you don't have to give any of that information.
You represent the buyer now, because the
I mean,
seller
the
went
buyer,
with it. Yeah,
that's what I mean, the buyer.
yeah,
You
but
don't
you
have to
can't
give
give them the motivation behind
Right.
where normally you would. So, all right, you have a client that decides to get into the landlord business, and they want you to represent them. Can you represent rental properties as a realtor?
Yes.
Okay, easy question. Same client wants you to screen the potential renters. You discover that one of the applicants is a convicted felon and you disclose it to your client. Is this a violation of the Code of Ethics?
Yeah.
But I feel we should know something like that.
No, because that's the landlord, right?
So this is a tough question. As their representative, as the landlord's representative, you have to disclose and protect their interest. However, you also have an obligation to protect the consumer's interest as well. And I know I said earlier this is about the Code of Ethics, not about state law. Just know in Massachusetts, the felony that you can discriminate against or can play a role in it is a drug dealing offense, not a drug usage, drug possession, or anything like that. So depending on what that felony conviction is, you may or may not, you may be violating a state law as well. In New Hampshire, just so you know, New Hampshire, if the person has served time in prison already and been released, they have served their time and you cannot give that information at all. So you have somebody that went to jail for 2 years for a drug charge, they get out, you can't use that as a reason because they served their time. Now, if they're waiting trial, it's a different story.
So you can know and not disclose it to the
Absolutely,
landlord or whoever.
yeah. So,
I guess that's fair.
right,
You served your time.
right, yeah,
You need somewhere to live.
Yeah.
Right.
everybody needs somewhere. All right. You have a new listing. I'm going to use percentages because we're all with the same company, and I'm not at all in any way telling you what you should or shouldn't. So if there's anybody watching that comes across this and is watching, that's not a part of LAER Realty Partners. Just know, set your rates at what you seem fit or deem fit. I'm going to use numbers here for this purposes though. We have a new listing client, and while going over the compensation, you point out that your professional fee is 6%. And that you split it with the buyer's agent, but you don't tell them how much. Is this a violation of the Code of Ethics?
With the buyer's agent?
Right. So you tell them, hey, look.
Don't tell them how much.
Right.
Just splitting with them.
Right.
No.
It's not a violation. Anybody else?
Guess not.
You're going to guess not? All right.
We should know that.
So on the form, it actually says, and you do have to tell them, like, okay, we're getting 6%, we're going to offer 2% in the MLS, best practices, but as long as you tell them that you're splitting the fee, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
You sign a buyer agency agreement. with a client and explain that your professional fee is 3%. However, the seller generally covers this. But in the event that they do not, the buyer will be responsible for any difference. And you explain it and go over that in your listing agreement with them.
Not a violation.
Not a violation, right? Anyone appraisers? The answer is no, right? Good. All 114 says is if you're an appraiser, you have to abide by the appraising code of ethics as well as the realtor code of ethics. All right, your seller has agreed that it's okay to share if there are multiple offers. Each time an agent calls to schedule a showing, you let them know there are offers, and seller will make a decision in the next 48 hours. Are you in violation of 1-15?
No.
I got one no. I'm going to read 1-15. I get a lot of excitement over this one here.
No.
Realtors, in response to inquiries from buyers and cooperating brokers, shall, with the seller's approval, disclose the existence of offers on the property. Where disclosure is authorized, realtors shall also disclose, if asked, whether offers were obtained by the listing licensee, another licensee in the listings firm, or a cooperating broker. So, the way I read it is it says realtors in response. This wasn't in response, this was volunteering the information ahead of time. We're coming out of a very strong seller's market. We've all had those calls where we call and we say, hey, we have a client that would like to see this, and the seller's agent says, well, there's multiple offers already on the table. You, at that point, tell your client may say, look, we've already gone through the multiple offers. I don't want to do it again. That seller's agent just lost out on a potential
So only
offer.
if they ask?
It's only if they ask. And as a buyer's agent, you can ask any question you want. What color are your socks? It doesn't matter. You can ask whatever you want. What the listing agent has to answer is yes or no, if they have permission, yes or no if they have multiple offers, and 2, where that offer came from. Not who it came from, but where. And why does that make a difference? That's not what they have to answer, but I'm asking you guys. Why does that make a difference?
I don't know, it could be part of their team or their office.
Right. So we talked about it a little bit a couple days ago, and that's the variable commission. So they may have a listing agreement that says, look, if I bring a buyer, instead of being 6%, it's going to be a 5% commission. Or if our firm brings a buyer, it's going to be 5% instead of a 6% commission. So that puts somebody outside of the brokerage at a disadvantage, because you could come in with identical offers, but because of that 1% in commission difference in the variable commission, they won't be identical offers, because the seller's still going to be at a 1% gain by going with either the disclosed dual agency or from the same agency. So that's why you ask. Now, it is required that a listing agent make it aware in the MLS whether it's a variable commission or not. So, and that's a practice. It depends on your geographic location whether or not it's common. So. Your client lives out of state and their house has been empty for 60 days. You're the listing agent. Sales have been slow, so you put the house on Airbnb for 1 week.
Definitely not a violation.
That's a violation. That happened in one of the New England states.
Somebody actually did that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Someone actually did that. So it's their property, not yours.
It's almost laughable.
Yeah. There's actually a 2020 episode out there about all the different things that realtors have done with homes, using them for parties, using them for affairs, using them for all kinds of things. So just keep that in mind. All right, while taking pictures of a new listing, you notice a brown water stain on the ceiling. In the listing, you do not put any mention of a possible issue with the roof or any pictures of the brown stain. Is this a violation of 2-1, which talks about disclosure? No, that's the consensus? Right. You don't know how old it is, you don't know when it was mitigated, if it was mitigated, so correct, you don't have to disclose that. You're not, unless you have a licensed roofing business. All right, you're representing a buyer and they decide to put an offer on a house. The sellers have a classic car in the garage. Your buyer wants you to put in an offer for $10,000 over list and have the seller include the car.
That'd be a pretty sweet deal. $10,000,
Yeah.
but probably a violation.
That would have to be a separate,
It would be, yeah, it would have to be a separate transaction because that car has no impact on the value of the property. So, not that, you know, if they were financing it, that any bank would be okay with a car being included in the.
and plus the seller would have to, well, if it was a second property, they would have to claim that as a capital gain on their property, and it's not, it's actually the car, so,
Mhm.
you know.
Okay, as a buyer's agent reviewing a CD, closing document, Alta, HUD1, whatever you want to refer to it as, for closing the next day, you see that there is only a $1 noted for the buyer's co-broke. Is this a violation of our code of ethics? Getting paid $1 from the selling agent? No.
They can do that, right? They just
They
have
can-
to charge something.
You're right. They just have to, yeah, and that's an MLS rule. That's not even in a code of ethics. There is no assumption of compensation or cooperation. So, I've mentioned a couple times there's a clause that you can put in your offer. Okay? This is the clause. There's actually two, but this is the best one, I think. And this is seller and or any third party to the settlement and transfer of this property agreed to pay buyer, not buyer's agent, pay buyer, whatever percentage of the sale price to settle their contractual agreement with the buyer brokerage at closing. Now, if you're doing a contingency where they're paying towards closing costs and all that, make sure you talk to the mortgage lender first, because again, if it's a conventional loan, they may only be able to go up to 6.5%. So if you're getting 5% back for closing costs and down payment assistance, that only leaves you about 1.5% that you can collect as a fee. This clause, I did not write this clause. This clause comes from NAR and has been vetted by the National Association of Realtors. This is what we teach in the Seller Representative Specialist Designation class. I mentioned also that I have a friend that only put one sentence of a 2-sentence clause and didn't get paid. This is the one she used. So ABC Realty rejects any offer of compensation made by the listing firm. Seller and or third party to the settlement and transfer of this property agrees to pay the buyer X percentage of the sale price to settle their contractual agreement with the buyer agent. It's basically the same thing as the previous, only there's the extra first line.
Can you go back to the previous second?
Sure. It's actually the same as what this,
Same thing?
yeah, it's the same, the second sentence. You cannot, and I heard the story the other day about an agent that said, if you don't pay me X percentage, then we're not going to submit the offer. That is a violation of the Code of Ethics. You cannot make the terms of an offer based on compensation. So how do you handle that? You have to have the conversation up front. I've been asked plenty of times by agents that call me on my listing and say, hey, is there any room? No, there isn't. That's what they ask me. Is there any room for compensation? No, it's 3% in the MLS. That's what I'm offering. It's 2.5% in the MLS. That's what I'm offering. Okay. With that said, the other thing is you can just tell the client, hey, look, tell your buyer client, they're offering 2%. We have a 3%. You know the client's situation. If it's something that you're just going to say, nope, I don't need that 1%, then just do an addendum to your listing agreement or buyer agency agreement, excuse me, and change it down to the 2. If you're willing to, you know, if they're in a position where they can, you know, you're not going to be hurting them, Just say, make sure they understand, hey, you're going to be you're going to be responsible for this 1% or $3,000. It's not like you have to write a check to me. It's just going to be figured into all your closing costs and everything like that. All right, after the last closing, here we go, talking about this. After the last closing and a $1 commission, you ask the listing agent on the next transaction what the co-broke is after the P&S is accepted. Is this the right time to ask that question?
No.
No. If you have any questions, it has to come prior to the offer. And in no way can you make it sound like it's contingent on them receiving an offer. So if you send it via email and you put, hey Joe, broker, just wanted to verify what the co-broke fee is on this listing, I would just leave it at that. Don't put in, I may have an offer. Don't put in, there'll be an offer coming. Just say, what is the co-broke? Probably the best way to do it is via phone call, if you can actually get an agent on the phone nowadays. Remember, text is in writing too, so be careful how you word that. All right, due to unforeseen complications with the inspection, the deal is about to fall apart over $500. The seller's agent suggests that both sides of the co-broke be reduced and the deal is saved. Is this a violation?
No.
No. You can certainly make adjustments after the fact, but you can't make it contingent. Again, that's the big thing. You can't play hardball over what you're going to get paid. An interesting story. Interesting, not really. But I had a transaction. The house had been on the market for nearly 60 days. Finally got an offer. But after everything was said and done, we were $1,000 apart. I talked to the buyer's agent. We both agreed to reduce each side by $500. I call up my seller, say, great news, we are going to be able to put this deal together. I'm going to send you over an addendum just so you know we're reducing the compensation by $1,000 to save the deal. And he said, over my dead body. It was a matter of principle. And so make sure you are communicating with your seller to let them know, because sometimes they're not going to go along with what we think makes sense. What ended up happening is the deal fell apart, and about 30 days later that seller said, okay Eric, I'll go ahead and take that offer now, and it was too late. So 3-4, you are the buyer's agent and your client wants you to put an offer in on a listing that you notice has a variable rate commission. You ask the listing agent if there are any other offers, and they tell you no. So you submit the offer without mentioning it to your client, mentioning the variable rate commission. Is this a violation of Article 3-4?
I guess no.
You guess no?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, variable commission.
Could that play a factor though in your client? If you notice that a listing has variable commission, you have to disclose that to your buyer, because it could, just because the day you asked there wasn't another offer, doesn't mean one didn't come in 10 minutes after you asked the question or the next day. So you do have to disclose any information you know about a property, you have to disclose it. You have a house under agreement, but want to try to get a couple extra buyer clients from it, so you leave it active until someone at the MLS tells you to change it. Is this a violation of Article 3-6?
Yeah.
The answer is yes, you're right. So, not to mention that you face fines and penalties and possible suspension from the MLS if you do this on a regular basis.
You can keep it as you can just, put it as under agreement, but you can also have it still accepting offers.
Right, you can do that, but you can't leave it as just active.
Right, yeah.
All right, Article 4, you own a 3-family and live in one of the units, and you rent out the other 2. You put a for rent sign in the yard with just your phone number. Is this a violation of Article 4?
Is you a realtor?
You're right, you. Like literally you.
No, because you're the landlord, right?
The answer is no. Yes, it is a violation, because even if you are the property owner, and you're a licensed or you're a realtor, you have to disclose you're a realtor, and all the rules apply.
Even on the sign, just the
Even
sign?
on just the sign. If you put your phone number, you have to put LAER Realty Partners and the office phone number.
Really?
Yes. Sorry to disappoint.
Is that just for a 3-family, or is it?
No, that's any.
kind of rental,
So I specifically went with rental here, even if it's a purchase. So whether you're renting out a single family that you own, a 2-family you own, or you're selling a property, you have to put the company you're with and the office phone number. You cannot just put.
If you're representing yourself?
Correct. Correct.
If it's in MLS?
No.
Is
Just
that
If-
anything, yeah.
As realtors, you have to disclose on anything you sell, whether you own it or not.
Okay.
Kiki doesn't like that answer. Doesn't mean, you work out what you need to with your managing broker and principal broker as far as compensation, but you do have to list that. All right, you suggest Article 6, you suggest to your client that they use a specific closing company. Unbeknownst to the buyer, the closing company is having a contest, and the agent that sends the most closings to them gets a $50 gift card. Is this a violation of Article 6?
Yes.
Yes. May also be a violation of RESPA, but that's for another day. Now, if I remove the word unbeknownst, so you tell the client, hey, just so you know, I have an agreement with this client, they may give me compensation in some form, is that a violation of Article 6?
No, as long as they know.
As long as they know, it's not a violation. However, again, there may be some outside things that it would be a violation of. I only bring this up because I know of a company in New Hampshire that does this on a monthly basis. And if you're put in that situation, don't let a $50 gift card put your realtor status at jeopardy. All right, Article 7. You have a buyer agency agreement for 3% and the MLS co-broke is 2. Your buyer agrees to pay the 1% difference at closing and cuts a check directly to the brokerage for the difference. Is this a violation of the Code of Ethics?
Yeah, because it could be a cash buyer. Could you say it can go into the, well, no, it's got to go in the HUD, right?
Right. Well, if they're a cash buyer, it doesn't have to go onto the HUD or the CD because there's no truth in lending there. But if they're getting a mortgage, then definitely it would have to go on there because it's a cost to owner or to the purchase.
Right.
But the big thing is Article 7 says you have to disclose it to all parties.
Okay, so they wouldn't be able to.
So the big thing is you have to be able to have told the selling agent, I'm being paid by more than one party. That's what this article is
It's
about.
all done at the closing. Yeah.
Right. I would let the seller know, or I'd let the seller's agent know ahead of time, even if it's just quick email, just so you know when you get the HUD state, when you're looking at the Alta, there's going to be a higher compensation. There's going to be a second compensation on the buyer side for that. I do it all.
Why do they have to know
So
ahead of time?
So the reason they have to know is if you look at Article 7, you'll see that it was adopted in 1993. What happened in 1993? Buyer agency came to be. So I think this is all a part of that, where the seller's agents wanted to make sure that the buyer's agents weren't making more. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's true.
if you, yeah, so you have a seller agency agreement for 7%, and the MLS co-broke is 2%. The seller side fee is 5%. Is this unethical according to Article 7? You're the seller agent now, and you're paying 2 on a 7.
Probably.
Probably.
I guess it's not. Doesn't matter, right?
It's not a violation because the seller's agent's only getting paid from one source. They're only getting paid from the seller.
who their seller is.
So that's why they don't have to disclose. Article 8, you receive an escrow check from your client, but they mistakenly make it out to you. You go to the bank, cash it, and convert it immediately to a cashier's check. Is this a violation of Article 8?
Yes.
Yes. Good answer. 9-1. Okay, so I use going over the P&S, but let's, for seeing we're in Massachusetts today, going over the offer with your client who has bought a house before, you highlight what each section is about and have them sign. Is this a violation of Article 9-1?
Really? Why would that? Why would that matter?
Because it says that you have to fully explain. So even if they bought a house before, our forms change regularly, right?
Oh, so you're not explaining.
Oh, yeah.
Right, you're only going
Highlighting
highlighting what, oh, well, this section just talks about where the property is.
Yeah.
According to our code of ethics, we need to go over it line for line. And it's becoming harder and harder, especially with the advent of dot loop and zip forms and DocuSign. It's very important. So if you're doing a buyer agency consultation or seller agency during your CMA presentation, take the extra 10 minutes to go over the forms at that point. That way it's somewhat familiar. Again, that's the best practices. You don't have to do it that way. But I certainly, that's how I do my consults, is to go over the forms that they're going to see in the future. 9-2, you have a new buyer lead from out of state and they are eager to put an offer in on a property. You send them the buyer agency agreement via .loop and tell them as soon as they sign it, you can start preparing the offer. Is this a violation?
Yeah, because
You didn't go over it with them, right?
you sent it to them.
Right. You need to go over it with them. You can't just send them forms and expect that they've read them and understood them. Now, even after you do it, 9 out of 10 are still going to say, when you say, do you have any questions? They're going to say no, because their eyes glazed over and they just want to move on.
Yeah.
So,
Like you said, with .loop, you still have to, you have a verbal conversation with them
Yeah.
prior to them signing this.
yeah. And even if they're out of state, see if they have either FaceTime or Skype. So,
I usually send it to them ahead of time without the ability to sign, so they have to read it.
that's a great.
And then I call them, like, do you have any questions on the form? If not, we can sign.
So for those watching, what Kiki said was, what she does is she sends them the form ahead of time that doesn't give them the ability to sign, so that they have to call and speak with her, which is an excellent best practices.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a good idea.
10-1, while showing a condo, your client asks if there are any other people their age in the community. Kind of went over this day too with fair housing. Can you answer that question?
Yes, if you know the answer.
If you know the answer, you can absolutely answer a direct question. What you can't do is go in and say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you're going to love this place because there's a bunch of people your age. Not going to work. All right. Realtor has a link on their webpage to a community resource page on their website for a community resource page with data and demographics. Is this a violation of Code of Ethics?
No resource? No.
No, because you're not the one providing the information. You're sending them to a source. All right, we beat this one the other day. MLS listing, beautiful inside and out starter home in a conservative neighborhood.
Yes.
You know, it's the conservative that always gets people, but they always glance over the starter home. But yeah, starter home needs to be left out too.
Right.
I feel like that's such a disadvantage, because when you say something, it puts that in their head, like, oh, this is just for starter home
Yeah,
people.
they're just
Yeah.
qualified.
Right.
Yeah, like, oh, that's not for me.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the smallest, stupidest thing, but it happens.
It does, yeah.
Your office enters listings in the MLS for you, and the person doing it is not a realtor. So you have an admin that enters in your MLS for you. and they go back and they put in great starter home. Is that a violation?
Well, they're doing it on your behalf, so yeah.
You're still,
Correct.
yeah, responsible.
Excellent, excellent. As part of your marketing, you select neighborhoods and prepare CMAs that you then send out to them with an intro letter. These are unsolicited CMAs. In the CMA, you don't say that you haven't actually been in their house. I mean, it's assumed that you're not a member of the Manson family. And for those of you who don't know the story of the Manson family, Charles Manson, back in the 70s, you know, had his old little clique going on and murdered some people. But prior to the murders, his group would break into people's houses and would put saran wrap in the bottom of door jambs in hallways. So in the middle of the night, you'd get up, or in the morning, you'd get up and go to walk, and you wouldn't see the saran wrap, and you'd trip. They would also rearrange cupboards in the middle of the night.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know.
Oh yeah, and then they would lift up the toilet seats and put saran wrap over the toilet seats, and then shut the toilet seats. So
In
when you
random houses?
yes, and that's how they practiced their stealth. And so, code of ethics, Charles Manson, it's all good. So you don't put in a disclaimer anywhere that you've never been in the house that you did these CMAs. Now, a lot of people say, well, why would you do a CMA if it wasn't requested? I do several CMAs a week just so that I, one, am familiar with what trends, and I can see a trend happening before whomever comes down and says, hey, we've got this happening. So that's why I do it, but I send out the CMAs and I put in there, just so you know, I've never been in your home to physically review it. That is in our Code of Ethics. Under Article 11, there's 10 things that have to be included in a CMA. And one of them is you have to tell people, I've not been in your home. Okay. Now, a lot of people, they don't do CMAs before, you know, they'll do a 2-call. They'll go see the house, meet the people, and then do a CMA. I myself don't do that. I go in with my CMA in hand and I let them know after I see the house. You know, as professionals, we should be able to work on the fly a little bit. And if we need to make adjustments, we can tell them, hey, look, this is sight unseen, but obviously now seeing the house, I have a little bit different opinion, and this is where I think we should be. All right. 11-2, in the additional comment section of the offer, you write in your own clause about a buyer having to sell their home. The seller gets another offer without a buyer having to sell. The seller consults with their attorney and your P&S is voided, or your offer is voided because the clause is not binding. 11-2 says we're not lawyers. Don't practice law. Even if you are a lawyer, be smart. I use the selling of the home as a particular example because we have clauses, we have clauses that are available to us where we can just copy and paste that are written by attorneys, as well as if you're in New Hampshire. In Massachusetts also has the form, I believe, that there are forms that you can use in place of writing in something. You just do an addendum for it. So don't practice law. Don't try to be fancy with your words. You post on LinkedIn advertising you offer free buyer representation to all your clients. Is this a violation of the Code of Ethics?
I don't know, I would say no.
So we got one no. Anybody ever advertised my services free?
No.
When I first started, I did. It's not a violation of the Code of Ethics. If you're a buyer representative, you're not charging the, right? Because on the Alta statement or the CD, it shows up on the seller side. The seller's paying for it. I don't do that anymore because a lot of times I will get paid from both sides. So, but
that
there's...
That would be binding if like down the road you wanted to, you know, get that extra 1% from the buyer on the contract. You already advertised now that.
Right. I mean, I'm not familiar with advertising law. I'm sure there's some sort of disclosure I could put at the bottom, but...
What if like the same thing when you switch brokerages? I just brought 100 of my business cards from one brokerage, and then next week I switch brokerages, and they still have my old,
information.
you know what I mean? That's,
Yeah.
You know, with ads and everything.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that happened with me too.
All right. Advertising. I give my first-time home buyers $500 towards their closing costs. Is this a violation of Code of Ethics?
Yes.
And why do you think it is?
Because I thought there was a law that you couldn't kickbacks.
Yeah, no kickbacks.
I actually don't know the answer to that.
So a lot of times I hear enticements, you know, can't be over $25, can't be over $50,
Yeah.
can't be over $75. Those are for gifts. This is a discount of your service. It's like using a coupon. 12-3 says that there's nothing inherently unethical about offering a discount. There's a brokerage out there, national brokerage, that offers rebates, right? We all know what goes on there. There's nothing unethical about that. What would be unethical is after closing, giving them a $500 gift card to Best Buy as a closing gift. But that's again, that's not in the Code of Ethics. That would be a state, you know, you got to follow your state laws. But just giving a discount to veterans, to first-time home buyers, to police or firefighters, or giving a discount because the day ends in Y.
Because this comes out of your commission, and a lot of them do include those coupons, and I've seen them in the flyers that go out, those little packages, yeah.
And for those watching on live, I think our internet just went down.
The internet guy's here, I just saw him walk in.
Yeah, Steve's here, but
Is that why it went down?
yeah, I'm not connected. Do we still feed Joe?
I'm still watching. YouTube.
Bear with me, guys. Okay. All right. So offering, you know, there's a vendor. I think they were at MGM that offers cruises. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. Okay. You see a great FSBO and you post it on Facebook. Beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bath home for sale to drum up some buyer leads. Is this a violation of Article 12-4?
Yes. That
Yes.
is, you have permission to disclose the property.
All right, you don't have permission to advertise. You can't advertise a property without having a signed listing agreement.
So if you verbally ask them, you still need something in written?
I would. So a desirable property is on Realtor.com, and you click the share link of the listing and you put it on Facebook.
It's a violation. You have to ask permission from the agent.
Sometimes they like you to share your list.
Some like it, some don't. There's a company in New Hampshire that if you share their links without getting permission, they will file a complaint against you. The rule is you have to display who the listing agent is. So if you notice on MLS Pin, anytime you print off an MLS sheet, somewhere on there, regardless of how small it is, says listed by so-and-so with so-and-so brokerage. That's okay, because you're disclosing the information. However, there are brokerages out there, big brokerages, that if you share their listing without permission and they don't, I mean, just being honest, they don't mess with the small time producers. If you're doing under $4 or $5 million, they don't pay attention. But if you're doing a big number and you're competition to them directly, this company does file ethics complaints. They don't win, but it's just the stress and the aggravation. All right. So you absolutely can share it as long as it has the listing agent there. Best practices though, reach out to the agent and say, do you mind if I share this? Most of the time they're going to say, yeah, no problem. And one class I had a agent who was very upset because a lender was sharing their post. Well, I don't understand the idea of getting offended by somebody sharing a listing I have, but I also don't do disclosed dual agency. So that, you know, if you're an agent that's what you want to do is disclose dual agency, and I could see where it would be, you know, where you may not want it shared, but your job is to get offers, as many offers and as quick as possible for your client.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
You've decided to sell your 3-family property, but you do not want to put it in the MLS. So you put a FSBO sign out in the front yard with just your cell number. We covered this earlier.
Right, we need your
So we know that
office name and
you
your
need,
office
yeah,
phone number.
So you really can't be a for sale by owner.
you cannot. You have, and that's the other thing, is you have to disclose
Yeah.
in the listing that there's a realtor interest in the property.
Right.
And then most states have the law that you have to disclose that regardless, but Code of Ethics says you do. Also, it's not real clear as far as how many parts removed from the owner becomes family interest. Best practices, even when I was selling my cousin's place last year, I still disclosed that it was a relative. Better safe than sorry, right? All right, you are bored one slow winter day and you're looking at Zillow and you come across a property that was sold in a neighborhood you want to market in. You notice that the selling agent hasn't claimed the sale, and you look them up and they're no longer in the real estate business. So you click the button and claim the sale. So anybody that is not aware, when you have a sale in Zillow, make sure you go and make sure you get credit for it. You can claim the buyer side and the seller, or buyer side or seller side, whichever you represented. But you cannot claim somebody else's.
That's funny.
Yeah. It gets done. It gets done. So, all right. Your website banner says #1 listing agent in your town. And at the bottom of the page, it says based on stats from 1/2/98 to 1/9/98. Is this a violation of 12-8?
We gave
I don't think
specifics,
so.
'cause
Yeah.
you gave the
So you
time.
gave specifics. The only thing is this is 11 years ago, 21 years. Whoa. Is that 21 years ago?
98.
Yeah.
Oh. I just felt really old.
Ah.
So
For a week,
for a week,
20 years ago.
20 years ago, that's pretty misleading. Even though you disclosed it, it's still pretty misleading,
Yeah, I
right?
didn't say that.
Yeah, why
But-
would you?
Well, because you're in the thing that people see, because who reads the disclaimers at the bottom of the pages?
Oh, yeah, at the bottom of the page.
Yeah. So, yeah, don't do that. You're licensed in multiple states, but only do business in one. However, your website shows that only shows your primary state where you do business. So maybe you have a New Hampshire license, but you really don't do anything in New Hampshire. On your website, on your LAER site, do you have to disclose your license in New Hampshire?
Do you have to?
I don't know.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. You have to disclose. So if you have New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Florida, you have to disclose your license in all three.
Why?
I don't know.
Like it says if you're not practicing, you don't want to promote that since
Well-
you're not practicing in that state.
So
You
let's.
probably have to get your license inactive, right? To accommodate those.
So what it says, it was adopted in 1 of 2007. Realtor website shall disclose the firm's name, state, and states of licensure in a reasonable and readily apparent manner. It says websites of realtors and non-member licensees affiliated with a realtor firm shall disclose the firm's name and the realtor or non-member's licensee states of licensure in a reasonable and readily apparent. So even if you're not a realtor, if you're associated, you still have to disclose. So
I mean, I
What about on
practice.
business cards?
Right.
I practice and I put them on my business cards. I put them on everything.
Some states require you put your license number, some don't. New Hampshire does not require, so I don't ever put
I
my
don't put
license.
mine everywhere now.
But some states do. With the new laws, I say new, it's 3 years now that we've had RESPA, or is it RESPA? The new financing. But we're required to give the lenders our license numbers now because it has to be on the disclosures for the finance disclosures. So, all right, SEO, search engine optimization. There are some people out there that are really good and put in all kinds of stuff, and then there's some of us that use companies to do our SEO. This is for our website promotion and stuff like this. It's all behind the scenes, but you put stuff in there. Real estate, first-time home buyer, sellers, blah, 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 blah. If you put in other brokers, you know, say you put in KW, you put in Coldwell Banker, you put in, you find the #1 agent in the town, let's just say, and you say, okay, it's Joe Smith, and you use that name in this SEO, even though nobody sees it on the public side of things, it affects your search engine results. It's deceptive. And there was a case in New Hampshire where a brokerage was using another franchise's name in their SEO. I don't know how they figured it out and found it, but they did. And so they ended up getting in trouble. So just make sure if you do any SEO optimization, if you do any of that, make sure you're not using specific information, but you could certainly use, as a LAER agent, you can use LAER, you can use home buyer mortgages, that kind of terminology. All right, anything wrong with a thing that says sign up for a free newsletter on your website? No. Is there anything wrong if you build a 30,000 email database and then turn around and sell those emails?
Yes.
Unless you disclose that you're going to do that. If you disclose, you don't have to worry about it. Okay, website, www.number1realtor.com.
No?
I would have to push back on that one.
You're,
A less
you
than
could
a
be
true
false
picture.
advertising.
Right,
Yeah,
it's
Not
misleading.
always #1.
Yeah,
Maybe sometimes.
maybe sometimes #1. In
From January 2nd to the 7th.
Yeah.
right. All right. So signature line that looks like that. I don't have I'm not a CPA and I don't have an MBA. So that's where this comes into a violation.
See, I don't know what happened
Yeah,
to
like
me,
that.
so it's like,
Right.
okay, whatever you say.
Right.
So shouldn't it say LAER as well?
Or license and that.
No. It doesn't have to say, I mean, this is just was an example of, I mean, there may be more to it, but this is just an example of what you might see, and the fact that it says I'm a CPA or an MBA are false, and so I would be in violation of 12-13. Advising buyers that it's not customary to use an attorney, so they don't need to.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that in Massachusetts so much, but say you're in New Hampshire, that's a violation. Squirmy agent has done you wrong. You are part of a neighboring board, so you file a complaint with both your board and their board. Is this a violation of the Code of Ethics?
Personally done you wrong?
Yeah, like well, you know that they committed a violation of the Code of Ethics. So you file it, so you belong to, say, the NAIR board, and they belong to the G-Bar. So you file a complaint with both G-Bar and NAIR. Is that a violation of Code of Ethics?
Can you file a complaint
It's not.
on a different board?
Go to your own board.
So you can file any board you want, but you can only file once.
Because there's a fee associated with it, correct?
Well, it's not because of the fee. It's because you can't
Have more than one.
have, yeah, it's kind of like double jeopardy.
Yeah.
So you can choose which board you want to go in,
Oh, to file, even if you belong to one, you can still file
Mhm.
in the one that they belong to.
Yeah. So, if I shared with you and said Joe Blow from ABC Realty got brought up with an ethics complaint because he used ZYX's marketing material, would I be in violation of 14-2?
I would assume gossiping.
You cannot share, even if he's found at fault, you cannot share that information. It's kind of like the HIPAA rule. Everybody's familiar with HIPAA in medical. So you can't share that information. Board asked for emails pertaining to an ethics case that they're hearing, but I accidentally hit delete instead of forward. Is this a violation of 14-3? It was an accident.
You're still in trouble.
It was an accident. Doesn't matter. It's still,
How can they prove, yeah, that it was an accident, yeah.
yeah. So it's still a violation. You don't like that squirmy agent was found not in violation, so you file another complaint based on the same incident. No.
And that was already
Go ahead.
determined, right?
Can I make a comment about
Of course.
putting the statistics in when we were talking about the number one agent? The problem with putting any of those things on any of your sites like LinkedIn or something like that is you maintaining your own stuff. So you may have been for 2018 the number one agent in your community, and then in the first 6 months of 2019 you go away to Hawaii for 6 months. So your income is going to be the same. You have to remember to update that, otherwise it's not only outdated but not true.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
social
it's
media.
a lot of upkeep.
Absolutely. Social media and print. So if you put on, if you have a billboard and you put you sold 200 homes last year and you just put last year, and then this year you only sold 194, you need to make sure you change it. All right.
Or just be more specific.
All right. So have I mentioned how much you despise that squirmy agent? You can't file another complaint on the same transaction, but you can on another. So eventually they'll get what they're coming to them, okay? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know you said you were going to be talking to squirmy agent. Let me tell you about them.
No, violation.
No. Now, I mean no offense to any agents. However, we do have an obligation as a selling agent or even as a buyer's agent to our buying client, but as a seller's agent, when I have offers come in, I sit down with my client. I don't just email them to them and say, here are your offers. I sit down with them. I have a sheet where offer 1, offer 2, offer 3 with bullet points. If I get an offer from a particular agent in New Hampshire that I know very well, I will tell them, this offer is from so-and-so. I've gone under contract with this agent 4 times in the past, and 4 times have I not made it to the closing table with this agent. Something to keep in mind that if you choose to go with this one, which you absolutely can, there's a good chance that 45 days from now, we're gonna be back on the market. That's not a violation. I'm not saying this person's a dirtbag. I'm saying this is what's happened.
Actual events, yeah.
If I get a listing from someone that's not from the area, or if I get, an offer from someone not from the area, especially if they're from a state where they have different rules and regulations, I let my client know, look, this offer is coming from here where they have this procedure and this procedure and this procedure, which we don't have. Sometimes that creates a problem. This, again, we could have some added frustration on your part. It's your choice. I think it's a good offer. I'm not saying we're gonna have these issues, but these are some things that have happened. If I have an agent that there's one agent that I've done 7 transactions with, and I'll tell him, I say, look, I've done 7 transactions with this one. The first 2 were bumpy and the rest have gone super smooth. We understand how each other work, we're good, but their offer is not as strong as these other 2, so you may wanna, whichever one you want, that's what we're gonna go with. You tell me. And it's their decision, it's not mine.
Right.
But you're influencing them.
I have an obligation to disclose all pertinent information about the transaction
And what could go.
and what could go wrong. I have that obligation to them. That's no different than me driving by a property and knowing that there's a pig farm 2 houses down and me disclosing, Mr. Buyer, I know you want this property. I need to let you know there's a pig farm 2 houses down. That's the same thing. I'm not, my only care is my seller. That's all I care about, my seller. So.
Right, that's
So,
Damn.
Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm sorry I was wrong about Squirmy Agent. They really aren't the spawn of Satan. Why would I have to say that? Because I told the sellers, this guy's horrible, we never get to closing, blah, blah, blah. If you say something derogatory about somebody, you have to apologize for it. So you've already committed a violation. There's no sense in committing a second violation. You have to be the bigger person and apologize. All right. Buyer's agent who got the closing doc with $1 compensation calls the listing agent. USOB, one flipping dollar. Is that a violation?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
you
showed
should
that,
know
and
before
he
the
showed
offer.
that in the.
Okay. So what's the violation?
Swearing at you.
Swearing at you. That's what I always, yeah, that's why I put the SOB in there. So, that's not a violation. There's nothing in our code of ethics that says we cannot swear at each other. It doesn't say we cannot yell at each other. It does not say we cannot hang up on each other. I sat 3 years ago, the professional standards workshop, which is done annually in every state. Sat through it. The instructor was from Missouri, and he summed it up great. And that is, just because somebody swears at you doesn't make it an ethical violation. It may make it a moral issue, but it doesn't mean it's not ethical. And so it also, says a lot about them, and they may not be in the business very long.
Right.
Or, of course, if you watch $1 Million Listings, it happens all the time. So, all right. You're sending out postcards to a geographic farm, and one of the people that receives the house is already for sale. Is this a violation or client tampering?
Don't you have to have a disclosure at the bottom?
It doesn't say you have to have a disclosure. Best practices is you have that disclosure that if you're currently represented by, but
No.
you don't,
No, because it wasn't intentional.
right, because it wasn't intentional, exactly right.
And that went to a lot, a
Yeah.
group of people,
Yeah.
so it wasn't they.
Yeah,
singled
you
them
didn't
out.
just pull the hot sheet and send it
Yeah.
all out to them and say, oops. You receive a call on a listing and you ask if they're represented by a realtor, and they say yes, but they are making calls because their house isn't on the market yet. You immediately ask if they have a listing agreement with the buyer's agent, and they say no. So you proceed to set an appointment for a CMA. Is this a violation of 16-2? Oops, why did it not change for you guys? Is it changed on that?
I wish we had like a hard copy of that to put the answer.
Yeah, it
down.
changed on,
It's changed on YouTube, okay. So I just read it out loud, let me do it again. You received a call from on a listing of yours. Stand by. Okay, there it is. So you received the call, and they say they're represented by a realtor, but their realtor's not, this actually happened. I got a call, they said, hey, what's the information on this house I had in Milford? I said, well, are you represented by a realtor? They said, yeah, we have a buyer's agent. I said, great. Have that agent call me. Well, he's not ready to make calls and show us properties yet because our house isn't ready to go on the market. The first thing I did was say, oh, I completely understand. Do you have a listing agreement with that agent? They said, no. because the house wasn't ready to go on the market. So I set an appointment to go and speak with them and did a CMA for them. Did I violate Article 1613?
Oh,
No. The agreements are for the property. So if they're a buyer agent and a sell, and they have something to sell, those are two different agreements. So I can certainly try if they don't have it. I didn't get the listing, FYI. But I tried. Same thing, if you have a builder and they have 3 sites that are built or are listed, but they're building a 4th one that's not listed, you can certainly call and see if you can get that listing. That's not a violation, you know, until it's in writing and on paper. Well, until it's on paper, let's just leave it at that. It's fair game. You see a listing that has been on the market for 300 days with no activity, no price drops, nothing in the last 6 months. You call the listing agent and ask them when the listing expires, and they tell you to go pound sand. You take that to mean call the seller and ask them. So you do. Is this a violation of?
Yes.
It's still under contract.
Okay. So the answer is no.
No?
If you call a listing agent and say, when does your agreement expire, and they say,
Oh, that's okay.
and they don't answer you, or they don't give you the answer, you are allowed to make contact with the seller and ask that one question.
Oh, okay, they don't answer you.
I don't know what good it's gonna do you, but you would know, you know, and at midnight on the day it expires, I guess you could show up on their driveway with your CMA in hand and listing agreement. And it's- yeah. But you can ask when a listing expires. All right, you're working in an open house and a buyer comes in alone. You start talking to them and they seem interested. You ask if they want to make an offer and they say yes. Is this a violation of code of ethics?
Yeah.
No. Well, you didn't ask if they had
Yeah,
an agent
realtor.
yet.
They
Great.
working with
Susan?
realtor. Yeah.
Susan got that one right away. The rest of you. All right, so yes, it's a violation because you didn't ask if they were working with. Now, again, terminology, if you ask them if they're working with a realtor, of course they are, right? They've talked to somebody at some point. You have to come up with the terminology that works best for you, that says, have you signed a buyer agency agreement with anybody? And even if you ask that, some of them will think that the property or the brokerage relation disclosure for the state is the equivalent, but it's not.
They usually lie anyways.
True. Or they're confused. All right, so you're working the up desk and a call comes in. I know this isn't a LAER issue, but for the sake of code of ethics, let's pretend. Seller on the other end of the phone starts talking about the no good agent they have now and wants to know if they could sell if you could sell their house. You set up an appointment to do a CMA. Is this a violation of the code of ethics?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Well, they have
They're in contract,
yeah.
still, they just don't like who they have. Yeah.
So,
But if the sellers, I don't know.
Well,
oh, go ahead, Susan.
are they still, that was my first question, are you still in contract?
Which they are, but they don't like them.
So they have to
So
start.
then
they
say,
have to
I cannot
file-
inter- I cannot interfere with the relationship.
You can provide the information that they ask specifically. You could go do this. However, if they say, great, I want to list with you, you have to say, well, first you have to terminate your agency agreement with the other agent and do not give them advice on how to do it.
They're
That's
gonna
still really,
ask you,
they're
right?
going to ask you. You know going into it, they're going to ask you. So it's a really, really fine line. It's kind of like working with somebody that doesn't have a buyer agency. You know they're going to ask you what your thought or your opinion is of the house. So in doing that, you're setting yourself up for issues. Just something to plan ahead for and consider.
So if they do ask, and you can't really give them any information, how to terminate the contract, do they talk to your agent?
Yep. And there's a good chance that, you know, the managing broker or team leader would get involved and be able to save it. So I know. Ugh. 45 days after every closing, I send the buyer a nice card and keepsake, even when I represented the seller. Is this a violation?
No,
No. Why do we say no?
because you're not in contract anymore.
Anymore, yeah, future business.
Right. So at closing, their buyer agency agreement terminates. That person's now a free agent. And the majority of agents out there do not follow up. So we're good to go there.
Susan.
Oh, go ahead.
Another thing about listings expiring and relationships, your point was great about don't advise them, but make sure you're checking MLS. I had a listing several years ago where the seller was trying to get out of his contract, and the listing agent kept telling him that it had been taken care of in MLS. It wasn't at all. He had just done a temporary withdrawal, or temporary this or temporary that. And the seller kept coming back to me and saying, I'm ready to go, and I just said to him, I will not speak to you or do anything for you until until this contract is completely dissolved. That's for you to take care of. And I don't think he was being told the truth, but you have to cover your bases. I had another instance where I don't think some people were truthful and they were elderly or didn't understand, let's say. And it ended up that two different people had the same house listed in MLS.
Doesn't even happen.
It does happen.
Oh my goodness.
Because elderly people don't understand sometimes and they're taking advantage of. So be very careful.
But wouldn't the other agents see that when they bring up the house on MLS, like the second agent going to list that house?
Eventually.
Well, and it depends on the other agent. So
That's
not everybody's ethical,
right.
even though they have an R after their name. Even though they wear the blue R, that doesn't mean 100%. I wish that wasn't the case, but to that point also, I had somebody call me up, owned a big lot of land in New Hampshire, was already zoned for subdivision, everything was in place. He wanted to sell it along with two other houses that he had. You never get those phone calls, right? Just some stranger out of the blue found you on the internet. I want to list about $4 million worth of properties. And I said, great. It was the day my daughter and son were both having their adenoids removed and tubes put in. And so I remember this very vividly. I'm like, I'm in the middle of something right now. They were just being given their anesthesia, and I was like, can I call you back? So I call him back and I get to talking to him. I verify the properties. He owned them. He absolutely owned them. But there's days when you just feel like something's up. And so I did some due diligence. I called back and I got his wife, and his wife was crying. And I said, what's going on? And the gentleman was bipolar and he was having a manic episode.
Oh dear.
So I said, well, don't worry about it. Because I said, don't worry about it. We'll get it taken care of. He ended up getting a hold of somebody else in my office. I went to the managing broker, said, this is the situation here. Here's the wife's contact. The agent that received the second phone call and the managing broker said, the wife's not on the deeds. It's not their primary residence. We're taking the listings.
Kind of sad.
Yeah.
Not with them. I left immediately because you can't do that to people. It's going to come back and get you. So,
Absolutely.
all right. It's 7 a.m. I'm standing in the driveway of the expired listing we discussed in Article 16-4 with a hot cup of coffee and a listing agreement in my hand. Anything unethical about that?
I don't think so.
No? Nope. You're good to go.
Here's your coffee, sign
Oh,
it.
yeah, the coffee was hot.
I've got this coffee for you after you sign.
Bribe them with coffee.
Okay. I don't know why I did this all in bold. It looks good though, right? You have an affirmative obligation to make reasonable efforts to determine whether a prospect is subject to a current and valid exclusive agreement and to provide the same type of real estate service. We've gone over this several times. You've got to make that. You can't say, well, they didn't tell me. That's not gonna fly. You have a client that wants to rent an apartment. You call the landlord on your client's behalf and negotiate the terms, never mentioning you are their agent. Is this a violation?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm going to tell you a story about a friend of mine who I was helping. Unfortunately, I helped him too late. He spent several months with a client, decided to rent, helped negotiate, even got the rent lowered. They signed the lease, went in, and he never got a check. He calls me up, he goes, Eric, how do I get paid on this? I said, well, where's your agreement? I don't have one, it was a rental. I said, you're not getting paid. Whether it's a rental or a purchase, always have agreements in place, always disclose, and get that taken care of. So
Usually it's with the landlord too, right? On the MLS, they'll tell you what the commission is. And,
this wasn't in the MLS.
oh,
This was
I see.
just a sign in the
So you
yard.
do a separate thing.
Yeah. You have a client that wants to purchase a FSBO. You call the seller, explain that you're the buyer's agent and that they, the buyer, will be paying your commission, but it will be tacked onto the sale price of the property. Is that okay?
Yes. Yeah, as long as he agrees to it.
He doesn't even have to agree to it.
Oh. The seller?
No.
He doesn't have to?
No. You just have to disclose that, hey, look, just so you know, my buyers are paying the compensation. You don't have to have, I would do a broker disclosure with them just to cover your butt, but you don't have to have a listing agency agreement. You don't have a facilitator agreement. You don't have to have anything. All you have to have is say, this is what's going to be. You negotiate the price. He accepts the price. She accepts the price. And then you say, okay, you accepted $100,000. My fee's $4,500. So you're going to see a purchase price of $104,500. And then in the offer in the purchase and sale, make sure you put in the disclosure that the $4,500 is going to the buyer at closing. A buyer calls in on one of your listings and you establish they do not have a realtor representing them. You proceed to answer their questions and set up a showing on the property. Anything wrong with that?
Yes, to have a realtor, not an agent.
I'm sorry?
You only asked if they had a realtor with an R, not just a regular agent? Is that an issue?
No.
Okay.
Not all my questions are that tricky.
Well, is it because, I don't know, you're answering specific questions about the property without having,
Any agency disclosures?
That's a state law.
Yeah.
This is perfectly okay. You can answer the questions. You just have to make sure they're aware that you represent the seller. That's all. Just make sure they understand.
Okay, I see that part. It's your listing. Okay.
I didn't even see that
You
part
see
either.
that? Okay, that was just too random.
Yeah, no. You show up for a showing and the seller is just stepping out of the house. The seller walks up to you, walks up to your client while you are in the car still finishing up a call. When you get out of the car, the seller is getting in their vehicle and pulls out with just a friendly wave. Is that a violation of code of ethics?
No.
No. What happens if you were standing there with your buyers and the seller came over and started talking to you?
Yep.
Happens all the time.
I hope with not too much information is,
Code of ethics says that any contact with the other agent's client has to either be with written permission or in the presence of. I'm not, go ahead.
I had a house where the seller refused to leave for all of our showings. He was there. Inspection, he was there the entire time. Every single time we were at that house,
It's awful.
he was there.
Was he talkative?
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I had the opposite of that. I was going to an open house with my clients who were a young couple and their parents were with us. And the man, the parent, kept going up and asking the listing agent questions at the open house. And there were moments when I wasn't there listening, so there really wasn't anything I could do except take over his mouth. But I finally said to him, you know, I would appreciate it if you have me present when you do that, because I wanted to hear what he was asking and what he was saying, and it wasn't good that he was doing that without me.
So unfortunately, we don't have control over people who aren't party to the buyer agency, and so when they bring along their fifth wheel, but yeah, and it goes the same way. If you're the listing agent and somebody comes somebody doesn't come with their agent to an open house, you got to be you can't have a conversation with them. Excuse me.
Other than what's on the listing sheet.
Even that, I would give them the listing sheet, and I would ask them if they came to me and said, hey, you know, would the client be willing to take $320 for this? That's a great question. I really need you to go back to your client or your agent and have them ask me the question. You know, how many bedroom septic is this? I'd answer that. But anything to do with a transaction, and I certainly wouldn't ask, are you pre-approved? Are you qualified? Are you looking cash? I wouldn't ask anything like that. All right, you see a listing was terminated in the MLS. You call the seller and get a CMA appointment and secure the listing. Property sells the first weekend and closes. 2 weeks later, the seller calls you very upset because previous listing agent is claiming they have to pay a commission. 2, because that person who bought the house was seen originally during the initial listing.
Yes.
Yeah, they saw procuring costs, what's that?
Procuring costs. However, in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, on the listing agreement, it says if the property is listed with another licensed real estate brokerage, no commission is due.
Oh, it says that in the agreement?
Yes.
Good, because I was gonna say that's not fair.
Yeah.
Well, so if you put in the listing agreement, the 30 days after, or whatever that is, it would only stay in force if they didn't relist with someone.
Correct. Now, in Massachusetts, that's not in the buyer agency paperwork. So I don't know how that would go as far as whether procuring cause. In New Hampshire, though, it is in the buyer agency agreement also that says if the buyer purchases in the next 60 days at a house you showed them, you're still owed a commission unless they've hired another licensed real estate brokerage. So in New Hampshire, once your agreement terminates, and if they go through another brokerage, you're out of the loop. Okay.
But doesn't that automatically happen when they make an offer with another agent?
In New Hampshire.
Yeah.
In Massachusetts, there's a question as to whether or not it does for buyer agency, because it doesn't specifically say it in the MAR form. I think in the GBAR form it does, but in the MAR form it does not. We had it up the other day looking at it. At closing, the title company makes the commission check out to you opposed to the broker. You say thank you and go directly to the bank and deposit it. Yep, that's a violation. All right, listing agent. Listing agent, I got $1 bazillion or $1 over list price, all cash, but I want okay.
Yeah.
This is trying to renegotiate your, look, I got an offer for you of, you know, whether it's a stupid number over list or list price. It's all cash, but I want 3% split instead of the 2% you're offering. Is this a violation of the Code of Ethics?
Yes.
Yes. If you had said, I want 3%, I want a 3% commission instead of the 2%, and had that conversation, and then after they said, go pound sand, you said, okay, well, here's your offer, then you're fine. But doing it with or after is not. You suggest to another realtor that you heard that the listing agent will pay an extra 0.5% more than what's posted in the MLS if they just ask for it. This happens all the time. Agents put 2% in the MLS, and then you get to the closing, or you ask, hey, is that the best you can do? And they say, oh no, I can do another 0.5%. I just do that because there's certain agents I don't want to split with. Can you then share that with everybody in your office?
No.
No.
Why would you not wanna do that anyway?
To help out your fellow lions who may have a deal with them in the future. I mean, yeah, you can't do that.
I just feel like you shouldn't be negotiating the price from the seller side. Like, for one, you're disadvantaged yourself, you're giving up more of your own money, and they have a client themselves that they can ask for it if they need it.
Can you come to all of my classes? I completely agree with what Kiki says. If you're a buyer's agent, get paid from the buyer. If you're a seller's agent, get paid from the seller. Moving on. You see a listing in the MLS and the property disclosure lists the seller's name. You do some internet creeping and find the phone number and email. Assuming if they're selling, they're probably a buyer too, you refer that lead to someone in a different brokerage. This is something that actually happened.
Wow.
A company was going on the MLS, taking all the listings, scrubbing the information, and then selling them as buyer leads
Wow.
at $7 a piece. It's not a lot of money, right? That's cheap money for a lead. Don't do it. You post the for sale directional at the end of the street that your listing is on. Is that okay? Just make sure that, you know, whatever town is okay. Oh, yeah, because if you put a sign up in a right of way and there's an accident,
Not only that, I had that happen to me in Framingham or someplace down there years ago, Natick somewhere, and I had 4 open house signs out, and when I was done, they were gone, and I just thought some kids stole them. And I don't forget what the end of the story was of why I went to the police station, but they had this entire garage with like 50 signs in it. So they had a bylaw that you couldn't put open house signs out.
So it's important to know your towns that you're working in for these reasons. And then the other thing, based on my fire background, I just happen to know that if you have a big post sign and a car hits it and it impales the driver and kills them, you could be found.
What?
You could be sued for that.
Wow.
Because they drove into it?
Yeah, because it was in the right of way.
Oh, so be careful your place though.
But if
Yeah.
it's in the yard,
If it's in the yard, that's different, but every town has different rules on what the right of way is. So just something to keep in mind. It happened in Texas, so. All right, you leave your current brokerage, and as soon as your license is transferred, so you have a new active license, you immediately call your past clients to let them know you changed venue. Is this a violation of the Code of Ethics?
No.
Sorry, guys.
It is?
It is.
Why? They live.
Because who do those clients belong to? Now, keep in mind, clients, that means they're under active buyer agency, seller agency agreement.
You said active, there, it says past closed.
I'm sorry. Thank you for that. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Past closed. This is not a violation. You're right. Because they're closed. What if they're active?
Oh,
Yeah, the
different
active
story.
different.
Because they're actually the brokers. Yeah. Sorry about that. Sometimes I can't even read my own typing. All right, squirmy agent is up to their old tricks again. And this time, instead of wasting your time with the board, you sue them. It's something that could have been handled by arbitration, but you refuse because you've already seen how that turns out. Is this a violation?
No.
Yes.
You have to go to arbitration.
You have to go to arbitration. If the other party says, I'm not doing that, sue me. Okay. Or you try, you go to your managing broker or your principal broker and say, hey, can you handle this? And they call up and say, hey, we have this issue. And they say, sue me. All right, sue them. They consented at that point. But you have to go through arbitration first if both parties don't agree. There it is. Squirmy agent says, fine. You don't want to arbitrate the matter? Sue me. Then you're fine to go. You have a dispute with an agent that belongs to another board. You agree to arbitration from their board but are unhappy with the outcome. You've made your bed, now you have to lie in it. Okay, going back to double jeopardy, if you're going to file a complaint, they should be impartial hearings. However, My best practices suggestion would be if you have a complaint with an agent that belongs to a different board of realtors, file the complaint in your board of realtors, because you know how your board works, okay? You don't know how much pull or
Right.
anything they have in theirs. That includes out of state. I think that's the next one here. No. So just so you know, you can go cross state lines. So you're a mass agent and you don't like the way I did something and you file an ethics complaint against me, you can absolutely file it in your local board, and I would have to come down here and handle that. You close on a deal, waiting on your commission check. You're informed that there is a dispute about procuring cause of the sale. You demand that your broker pay you your commission even though there's a dispute. Is this a violation?
Yes.
Yes. If it's being held in escrow, it's being held in escrow. You get to wait it out just like the broker does. Anytime you demand anything, it's never a good idea. Oh, here we go. You can't arbitrate with a realtor from another state. True or false? False. All right. This was not as painful as some of them have been, but Susan's got some more. Now, for those of you who are New Hampshire licensed, send me an email. I will give you the voucher for 3 CEUs.
Sweet.
Also, for those who, all realtors, you have to take a 2.5-hour code of ethics class every 2 years. We all went through it last year, right? So between January 1, 2019 and December 31st, 2020, you have to take another code of ethics class. This qualifies. So for those of you here, I will get you your certificates and you're good to go. Till 2020, you just have to give that to your AE at your board. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
Thank you, Eric. That was great. Just wanted to let everyone know that we are switching up the subjects tomorrow and Wednesday because of some conflicts with the speakers. So tomorrow will be the art of negotiation and overcoming objections, which is going to be a wonderful interactive class. Again, I will introduce that tomorrow morning, and we will remind everyone that the manuals and the PowerPoints are in Jostle. On Wednesday, we will have Ross Mortgage here talking about Real Estate 101. Again, interactive. Prepare your questions, anything that you have on mortgages, on preparing for being a buyer, how to qualify for a mortgage, whatever. And we will also go over list reports in depth and how to use the services of Ross Mortgage. So that'll be a great class as well. Have a great day. Any questions at all, just let me know, and we will see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.